Hi everyone, this is Scott Geisler, Business Development Manager with TDWI, and I'm here in Chicago with our Director of Research, Philip Russom, who focuses on our data management practice. Philip, welcome to Chicago.
Hey.
Thanks for coming.
Glad to be here, Scott.
Excellent. So just a couple of questions we wanted to discuss with you today about big data analytics. It seems to be a very hot topic, obviously getting a lot of press coverage lately. And you just started a new TDWI best practices report on the topic. So what exactly is big data analytics?
Yeah, it's funny. It's actually two things, and what's interesting is that there's such a strong intersection between the two of them. People are getting a lot of business value out of putting analytics and advanced forms of it together with very large data sets, namely big data. So you asked me, what is it? Well, let me start with the big data half of it. And I've already started interviewing users as part of the report. And I ask users, so how do you define this big data thing? And a lot of people pop up and say, well, it's a data volume thing. And for us, really, big data starts at 10 terabytes of data, which is a lot of data.
Yes.
And we're talking about 10 terabytes only for analytics, not the whole enterprise. So when you think about it, it's just for analytics. That 10 terabytes is a lot, but a lot of people I'm talking to have hundreds of terabytes just for analytics.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is, and so a lot of people think, oh, it's a data volume thing. Well, actually it's not. There's even more to it, which makes it bigger than big.
Sure.
So there's also the fact that big data tends to be complicated. It tends to be coming from a lot of different sources. So you have your usual enterprise sources like operational applications, ERP, CRM. Nowadays, you've got your web sources, right?
Sure,
So your website's generating all kinds of logs that capture what visitors are doing on your website, and it's very valuable to analyze that and figure out, how your customers behave in a web environment.
Sure.
Not just in, how they behave through the call center app and other more traditional applications.
Right.
Also, if you look at the data that's coming in from the web, it's not traditional data types, right? It's more web types. Some organizations that have a big web service are looking into social media, and that makes the big data even bigger because there's a lot of information there. You want to understand about how your customers are interacting with each other, not just interacting with you through these social media. So I think you get the idea. Big data is not just about volume.
Right.
It's about the complexity. Now, I'll make it even worse. Big data is also about what some people call velocity. It's, the speed of how the data is coming at you.
Sure.
So more and more, depending on how you may collect data from, say, a website, you may be collecting it in real time. So imagine big data, but the volumes are coming at you relentlessly in real time. More and more today, different types of organizations will have sensors. So say in a manufacturing environment, you got a lot of robotics. There's data just streaming relentlessly off the robotics.
Sure.
And so, we have this conference coming up, and a guy's going to talk about how they have robots who do all their quality assurance testing. And so they need to look at that in real time so that if there's a bad lot of supplies that come in, you can see it immediately from the way the robotics are behaving. But you have to be able to capture big data in real time. So it's the volume, it's the diversity, it's also the velocity and the speed that it's coming at you.
Well summarized, thank you. So Philip, big data is all about multi-terabyte data sets, right?
Yeah, that's a big chunk of it, but like I said, it's like one vendor calls them the 3 V's, right? So there's the volume, multi-terabyte data sets. There is the variety, and that's traditional data from traditional applications mixed up with web data, maybe social data. I talked about robotic data. There's all kinds of sensor data that's coming in scientific and things of that nature. And then, of course, there's velocity. That's the 3rd V.
Right.
So what's the speed of the data coming at you? And so big data can have a lot of different velocities. Some of it can be data you collected years ago.
Right.
Because if you're going to do analytics with big data, you need some kind of history to figure out the seasonality of your customer behavior, figure out the seasonality of your whole business.
A point of comparison, if you will.
There you go.
Right.
Even if you're collecting data in real time, it's hard to make sense of it unless you can see how that same business entity behaved 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So the velocity can be, that's the 3rd V. So that can be real time, but it can be, any speed, even stuff that you collected a long time ago.
Nice, very nice. So it's scary how much goes into big data.
Absolutely.
And it makes big data even more challenging to deal with than I thought it was. So tell me a little bit about the analytics that go with big data, please.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's different too. It's the kind of analytics that we're seeing people apply with big data. Let's start with what people are not doing.
Okay.
The acronym OLAP, O-L-A-P, Online Analytic Processing. That's still the number one most popular, most used form of analytics today.
And how long has that been around?
OLAP, I think Ted Codd came up with the 12 laws of OLAP in the late 80s,
Okay.
right after he came up with the laws for the relational database, right?
And yet it's still the primary analytical use today.
Yeah, and OLAP, it's very much, it's just a couple of steps away from reporting. It's largely about finding new ways to look at data you already know, that you understand very well, data that's usually very structured from traditional applications.
Okay.
That's not what we're talking about with big data analytics. We're
Right.
talking about what some people would call advanced analytics.
Okay.
Might be based on data mining, statistical analysis, natural language process, artificial intelligence. See, there's a wide variety of different analyses there beyond OLAP. And in particular, you need, OLAP's really about, it's highly combinatorial. You put data that you know and trust into dimensions, and you combine them differently. I know you've worked in sales, so the common OLAP query would be, what were the revenue figures for the Western sales region for fourth quarter?
Right.
So that's 3 different dimensions there. And
Right.
you know all that data, it's just you may have different ways of combining it. What's going on with big data is people need to do what I call discovery analytics. Some people might call it exploratory analytics. So it's not like OLAP where you're just recombining data you know and love,
Right.
and that you've cleansed the heck out of, and
Sure.
it's squeaky clean and so on and so forth.
We like clean data.
There you go, exactly. For some things you do, like regulatory reporting, that's
Sure.
the cleanest data you got to have.
Yeah.
With big data analytics, you want to discover things you never knew before.
Okay.
And to discover things you never knew before, you typically have to tap data you never tapped before for
Yes.
analytics.
Very interesting.
And that's where a lot of these huge data volumes kick in. A lot of it's this web data that a lot of companies have been, especially weblogs, they've been saving tens of terabytes for years, but they never really figured out what the heck to do with it. It's recently that people are figuring out how to do an analysis with these new data types.
Yeah.
Even stuff like websites that have been around forever. And of course, kind of the cutting edges would be things like discovery analytics with social media.
Okay.
And things like discovery analytics with sensory data.
Very good.
And in fact, recently we have technology that can take things like a video stream. It's not even number. Well, it's numbers, but it's representing pictures, right?
Right.
And you can actually, turn that into certain types of numbers, catch it, certain frame per second.
Wow.
And actually analyze movements, and you can do that for surveillance purposes, security purposes.
Amazing.
There's scientific purposes. Some people use video streams to watch for movement, and you can do similar things with audio to determine whether there is some movement. I talked to a guy recently. He's got hundreds of microphones buried in the ground, and they're listening for sounds that could show tectonic movement that might lead to an earthquake. See what I'm saying? So
Very cool.
There's all kinds of this crazy stuff coming out of all kinds of weird sensors.
Sure.
There's satellite photos, with military applications watching for movement.
Yep.
Weather prediction has just been completely turned around because you can use cameras in space to watch weather patterns,
Sure.
that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And then it's not just the velocity, the real time. You put that together with traditional history-oriented data you've collected.
Right.
Right, and so you put the whole thing together. You put the kind of older data you've collected with the newer stuff, and
Sure.
it's even bigger big data, right?
Absolutely.
So you get the idea. A lot of this is really discovering stuff we never knew before, and we're doing that with data types we never tapped before, and we're
Excellent.
doing it with different types of discovery analytics.
Very cool. So what kind of analytic tools would a business analyst need to use to get the discovery analytics
Right.
that you just described? Because those seem like they would be valuable and important to moving a business forward.
Yeah, well, let's start with TDWI membership. We've got, over 5,000 members at any time. And one of the things I see real common with TDWI members, they're actually going back to SQL. And whether they're hand coding SQL or using tools to generate it, they're going with a more query-based discovery analytics.
Okay.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. People know SQL; they know it very well. Any user organization will have lots of tools that can address and access data through SQL, that kind of thing. And you can discover amazing things through SQL. And we think about data warehousing, where you model the data warehouse to accept data that will then be analyzed. Actually, nowadays, people, another reason they use SQL, instead of doing the modeling and rearranging data, they can actually rearrange and model data in SQL. And part of that's because server memory is bigger. We've got 64-bit computing. In-memory analytics tends to be part of big data analytics.
Okay. Yep.
That kind of thing. And also, you know, we were talking about agility earlier, and analytics can get agility by putting a lot of the remodeling of data into the analytic tool.
Sure.
And if it's SQL-based, the remodeling of data is there at the SQL level. So SQL is a very popular discovery analytic that people are rediscovering, and you know, SQL's been with us since, you know, the relational database was invented, right? So it's funny, this old technology has a new application. But other people are going to other different tool types. Tools that do data mining are very useful. You can mine through lots of data. I talked to people recently at a security agency in our federal government, and they use a lot of data mining technologies there because you can find different events in big data coming from lots of different sources and then correlate them. Sometimes it's called complex event processing.
Yes.
So you correlate these events that may have happened years between each other, but some of them have just happened, you know, within seconds.
Right.
And you can spot a situation that may be a security threat. One of this agency, for instance, can see ships coming into U.S. ports, read their manifest, look at a variety of problems, look at the list of crew members there, identify them, you know, cluster things together like you do with data mining, and there might be a problem, and it might lead them to actually stop the ship from coming into port.
Wow, very interesting.
Other things would be natural language processing.
Okay.
If you think about social media, a lot of it's people typing natural language text, you know, human language.
Right.
So you need special technology to read that text, right, and then plug that into all the other stuff.
Sure.
Artificial intelligence has a big play on this and so forth. A lot of different tool types coming to bear with big data analytics.
Sounds like it. It's a very robust market, so to speak.
It's big, it's rich, it's very exciting because it's new stuff. And some of the technologies are new, some of it are old but have a new use. But really, it's new business uses, and new uses in science and federal agencies.
Well, could be, you know, something like that truly does create BI that moves business forward toward better decision making, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we go down to more of a for-profit kind of corporation, that kind of business use, big data analytics just helps them understand profitability with more dimensions than you ever could before.
Right.
We've for years talked about the 360-degree view of the customer.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, and some people I talk to, they joke and say, well, we only have 39 degrees. We didn't get to the full 360.
Right.
Well, you can actually have a greater completion of that view of the customer through big data, simply because you've got new sources to tap and learn more about the customer.
Makes sense.
And it's not just customers, even stuff, any business entity you want to think about, any kind of product and the quality of products, you know, where they're sold, where the supplies come from, the reliability of suppliers.
Yeah.
Through big data and collecting data from more sources of different types, you can just fill out a bigger and more complete picture than you ever could before.
Excellent. So you've given us a great definition of big data analytics, and before we wrap up, you know, what are user perceptions about big data analytics? Is big data a problem that is just to be managed, so to speak, with its size, diversity, and velocity, or is it an opportunity to be seized to truly do what we just described, and that is help a for-profit entity move forward or help a governmental agency save money or save lives? Is there the potential there for that, Philip?
Yeah, I've actually been asking people the same question through an internet-based survey.
Okay.
Now, the survey's going to run for a few more weeks, but I got a sneak peek recently, sort of ran some reports to see what people are saying so far. So far, people responding to the survey, in fact, 70% say it's not a problem, it's an opportunity.
Fantastic.
And it's all the stuff I said earlier. It's to find out things they never knew before, to quantify business entities to a level that was never quantified before, right? To have more dimensions than you ever had before. So people see that as great opportunity, whether they're in science, some sort of security agency, or a for-profit business, right? They all say it's an opportunity. And a minority of people say it's a problem. And, you know, I have to say, storage technologies have gotten so much better, faster, smarter, and cheaper.
Sure.
They've got, I mean, just the price of storage is outrageously cheap.
Right.
And with that in mind, big data itself was a problem, you know, just as recent as 2 years ago, right? And so, the economics, the technology around data storage, and also just the speed of query against big data, it's actually quite a list. Those things have gotten so much cheaper, faster, and more reliable that big data is not a problem anymore. It's actually an extraordinary opportunity.
Fantastic. Well, Philip, we certainly appreciate your insights and your conclusions and what you've told us here. And certainly, I think you can look for more of these sharp insights and conclusions from Philip and related research from TDWI Research. We do have this best practice report coming out, as we discussed, on big data analytics, which Philip is writing, and we're looking forward to that. And we'll be looking a lot at big data analytics at our Solution Summit in San Diego, and would welcome you to join us there. So with that, we thank Philip for his time, and best of luck. Thank you, Philip.
Great talking with you, Scott.
Likewise.